The first thing I noticed wasn't the man. It was her smile. I was digging through an old storage box in our garage because my daughter needed photos for a school family project. Most of the albums were exactly what I expected: birthdays, vacations, Christmas mornings, blurry pictures from cheap disposable cameras. Then a loose photograph slipped out from between two pages and landed face up on the concrete floor. My wife was standing beside a man I'd never seen before. Not just standing beside him. She was looking at him the way she used to look at me before life became schedules, bills, and exhaustion. Her forehead rested against his shoulder while he held her around the waist. Whoever took the picture caught one of those moments people don't fake. On the back, written in faded blue ink, were 4 words. Always us. No matter. For a full minute I convinced myself it had to be an old boyfriend. Something from before we met. Everyone has a past. Then I looked closer. She was wearing the silver necklace I gave her on our 5th wedding anniversary. And suddenly the room felt too small to breathe in. I wish I could say I confronted her that night. I didn't. Instead, I slid the photo back into the album exactly where I'd found it and acted like nothing had happened. We ate dinner with our daughter, argued over whose turn it was to load the dishwasher, watched half a movie, and went to bed. She fell asleep within minutes. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning I watched her in a way I never had before. Every text notification caught my attention. Every smile at her phone made my stomach tighten. She noticed me staring once and laughed. "Why are you looking at me like that?" I forced a smile. "Just tired." The truth was that my brain had already started rewriting the last few years. Late meetings. Weekend conferences. Girls' trips she insisted she needed after stressful months at work. None of it had seemed unusual before. Now every memory felt contaminated. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. One old photograph wasn't proof of anything. But deep down, something inside me had already begun to crack. 2 days later, I did something I had always judged other people for. I looked through her old photo boxes while she was visiting her sister. I wasn't proud of it. My hands were shaking the entire time, and I kept telling myself I would stop after 5 minutes. Instead, I searched every envelope, every album, every forgotten stack of pictures tucked into dusty containers. Most of them were exactly what you'd expect. Then I found another photo. The same man. This one was taken at what looked like a summer festival. They weren't kissing, but they were standing impossibly close, laughing at something outside the frame. He had one hand resting on the small of her back. She looked completely comfortable with him. My heart dropped when I noticed the date printed in the corner. It was from 8 years ago. We had already been married for nearly 6 years. When she came home that evening, I couldn't even look at her the same way. She hugged me from behind while I was washing dishes and asked, "Everything okay?" I nodded. It was the easiest lie I'd ever told, and somehow the hardest. I carried those photos in my backpack for 3 more days, like they weighed 100 pounds. Every time I looked at her, I heard the same question in my head. Who is he? On Friday night our daughter went to a friend's house for a sleepover, leaving us alone. The silence in the house felt unbearable. She suggested ordering takeout and watching a comedy, completely unaware that my world had already fallen apart. Halfway through dinner, I reached into my backpack and placed the first photograph on the table. She froze. The color drained from her face so quickly it frightened me. "Who is he?" I asked quietly. She stared at the picture for several seconds before looking back at me. I don't know. I couldn't believe she'd chosen that answer. "You don't know?" I repeated. "You're holding him like he's the love of your life." She swallowed hard and pushed the photo away as if touching it burned. "It doesn't mean what you think." "Then tell me what it means." Instead of answering, she covered her face with both hands. That silence hurt more than any confession could have. She finally lowered her hands, but she still wouldn't meet my eyes. I honestly don't know who he is, she whispered. I laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because it was such an absurd thing to hear. I slid the second photograph across the table and watched her expression collapse all over again. There are 2 pictures, I said. Different places. Different days. Years apart. You're telling me you don't know this man? Tears filled her eyes almost instantly. I don't remember him. That answer made even less sense. You don't remember someone holding you like that? She kept shaking her head. Please believe me. I stood up so fast my chair scraped across the floor. Stop asking me to believe impossible things. She started crying harder, repeating the same sentence over and over. I swear I'm not lying. For the first time in our marriage, I wondered if she was manipulating me or if something was genuinely wrong. Both possibilities terrified me. Either my wife was hiding an affair that had lasted years, or she was looking at those photographs with the same confusion I was. The next morning, she came into the kitchen looking like she hadn't slept either. Without saying a word, she placed her phone on the table in front of me. You can check everything, she said quietly. Messages. Emails. Photos. I have nothing to hide. That should have made me feel better. Instead, it made me even more suspicious. People don't usually hand over their entire phone unless they've already deleted whatever matters. Still, I went through it while she sat across from me with red, swollen eyes. There was nothing. No secret conversations. No hidden photo albums. No dating apps. No strange contacts except Daniel from work, whose messages were exactly what she claimed, boring conversations about deadlines and meetings. I looked up at her. So where did these pictures come from? I don't know. You expect me to believe someone took romantic photos of you with a complete stranger? She rubbed her temples, then said something that sent a chill through me. I think I've seen him before, but only in my dreams. I wanted to dismiss it immediately. Instead, I noticed how genuinely frightened she looked when she said it. I told myself I wasn't going to chase a ridiculous explanation about dreams. Then her older sister called. She'd apparently heard that we'd had a huge argument, and she asked if everything was okay. I almost lied, but something stopped me. I told her about the photographs. There was a long silence. Long enough that I pulled the phone away from my ear to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Finally, she asked, "Did you show her both pictures?" "Yes." Another silence. Then, in a voice I had never heard before, she said, "Don't push her too hard." My stomach tightened. What does that mean? She hesitated again. There are things from years ago that she doesn't remember very well. What things? I shouldn't be the one telling you. That answer only made everything worse. I drove straight to her house that evening. When she opened the door, she looked at me with the same guilty expression my wife had worn. Before I could even ask a question, she sighed and stepped aside. I knew this day might come, she said softly. And I wish it never had. Her sister didn't invite me to sit down right away. She walked into the living room, stood by the window for almost a minute, and kept rubbing her hands together like she was trying to warm them. I've kept this secret for over 10 years, she said. I promised I'd never tell anyone. My pulse was pounding. What secret? She looked straight at me. Your wife was in a serious car accident before you met. I know that. No, she said quietly. You know she broke her arm and spent a few weeks in the hospital. That's the version everyone agreed to tell. My mouth went dry. She had a traumatic brain injury. I stared at her, waiting for the rest. For weeks she couldn't remember people correctly. Some memories came back. Others never did. The doctors said there might always be gaps. I felt sick. So you're saying she really doesn't recognize the man in those pictures? She nodded slowly. I believe she doesn't. Then who is he? her eyes filled with tears. That's the part nobody in this family was ever willing to talk about. I sat there in complete silence while her sister struggled to find the right words. When she was recovering, she said, there was someone who visited almost every day. The man in the photos? She nodded. He wasn't family, but he acted like he belonged there. He brought flowers, stayed for hours, and refused to leave when visiting time ended. I felt my chest tighten. Who was he? We only knew him as Adam. And nobody thought to tell me this before I married her? She closed her eyes. By the time you met, she didn't remember him anymore. Not his name. Not his face. Nothing. The doctors warned us that forcing forgotten memories could do more harm than good. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So everyone decided to erase him? It wasn't that simple. Then explain it to me. She took a deep breath before answering. Because he disappeared. What do you mean, disappeared? I mean, one day he stopped visiting the hospital. He stopped answering calls. It was like he vanished without leaving a single explanation. That answer only raised more questions than it solved. I drove home with more questions than answers. When I walked through the front door, my wife was sitting on the couch exactly where I'd left her that morning. She looked up the second she heard my keys. You talked to my sister. It wasn't a question. I nodded and sat across from her. Why didn't you tell me about the accident? I told you about the accident. No. You told me the edited version. She stared at the floor. My parents didn't want me living like a patient forever. They said if I focused on what I couldn't remember, I'd never move forward. And Adam? The moment I said his name, she flinched. I don't know that name. I believed her. For the first time since finding the photograph, I actually believed she wasn't pretending. But that didn't make the pain disappear. There are pictures of you holding him, I said quietly. Looking at him the way you used to look at me. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I wish I could explain them. So do I. We sat in silence, separated by a truth neither of us fully understood, yet both of us had to live with. A week later, her parents came over because I insisted we stop pretending everything was normal. The atmosphere was tense before anyone even spoke. I placed both photographs on the coffee table. Her mother covered her mouth. Her father looked away. So, I said, who was Adam? Neither of them answered. My wife kept looking from the photos to her parents, searching their faces for recognition that never came. Finally, her father let out a slow, exhausted sigh. He was her fiancé. The room went completely silent. I actually thought I'd misheard him. Her what? He proposed 6 months before the accident, he said, barely above a whisper. They'd been together for years. I looked at my wife. She was crying, but her expression was pure confusion. I was engaged? Her mother reached for her hand. You don't remember any of it. I felt anger rising so fast I could barely control it. You let her marry me without ever telling either of us she had been engaged? Her father lowered his head. We believed that part of her life was gone forever. Those words didn't comfort anyone in the room. They only made the silence heavier. The conversation lasted for hours, and every answer uncovered another lie. Her parents admitted they had packed away every photograph of Adam after the accident. They told relatives never to mention his name. If anyone asked, they simply said the engagement had ended before the crash. It hadn't. According to them, Adam stayed by her side every day in the hospital, hoping she'd remember him. Sometimes she looked at him like a stranger. Other times she became frightened because she couldn't understand why this emotional man kept holding her hand. Eventually, the doctors advised him to give her space. He disappeared a few weeks later. No goodbye. No explanation. No one knew whether leaving had been his decision or if someone had convinced him it was the kindest thing to do. I looked at my wife while they spoke. She wasn't grieving a lost fiancé. She was grieving the realization that an entire chapter of her life had been erased without her consent. That realization broke something inside her. And, if I'm honest, it broke something inside me too. The months that followed were nothing like I expected. I had imagined that the truth would either destroy our marriage or somehow set us free. Instead, we ended up living in a strange place between those two outcomes. My wife started seeing a therapist who specialized in trauma and memory. I went with her to a few sessions, mostly because I didn't know how else to support her. The therapist kept reminding us that missing memories don't always come back, and forcing them can create false ones. That terrified my wife. She didn't want fantasies. She wanted her own life back. Sometimes she'd stare at those photographs for an hour, hoping something would click. Nothing ever did. Other days she'd cry because she felt guilty for mourning someone she couldn't remember loving. I struggled too. Part of me was relieved she hadn't betrayed me. Another part couldn't stop wondering if I had unknowingly built my entire marriage on the ruins of someone else's future. It wasn't jealousy anymore. It was grief for a story none of us were allowed to finish. It's been 3 years since I found that photograph, and it's still sitting in a drawer I can't bring myself to throw away. People assume our marriage survived because the mystery was solved. It wasn't. We learned who the man was, but we never learned what happened to him. We searched public records, contacted old friends, even hired someone to look for him. Every lead ended the same way. Nothing. My wife still has no memory of Adam. Sometimes she asks me what kind of person I think he was. I never know how to answer. Was he the love of her life? The man she was supposed to marry? Or just another victim of an accident that stole more than memories? I don't feel like I lost my wife to another man. I feel like all of us lost someone to a version of the past that can never be recovered. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that betrayal isn't always caused by lies or cheating. Sometimes it's created by silence, by the people who decide what truths you're allowed to live with. And somehow, those are the wounds that never completely heal.